Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and it looks like even more info has come out about this apparently leaked The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time remake. So for those who missed the story yesterday, Nate the Hate, who's considered to be one of the most reliable insiders there are, so reliable that so many bigger outlets have now reported this widely. And what's been reported so widely is that Ocarina of Time is getting a full remake for this holiday as part of Zelda's 40th anniversary. Now, it's been a long road to this point. This is something we've been theorizing about for years, and I think a lot of this started when Final Fantasy VII Remake was announced for PlayStation. Some of you might be wondering why, and basically what I'm getting at here is that the original Final Fantasy VII on PlayStation 1 was considered to be kind of like that iconic adventure, that greatest of all time kind of game. And the equivalent for Nintendo is Ocarina of Time for the Nintendo 64. And so once that was announced, many people, myself included, started to think, what if Nintendo did something similar for Ocarina of Time? And in the middle of the Switch 1 era, there were rumors for an Ocarina of Time HD, which doesn't necessarily have the exact same implication, but there were rumors of that. They never materialized. But in 2023, we started to get some real hope. There were two different interviews with the Zelda series producer Aonuma, who has a long history of teasing future Zelda projects, and he himself has even confirmed that he has teased future Zelda projects in interviews like this, oftentimes where he's laughing or something to that effect. Two different times in 2023 interviews, he indicated so, saying no comment point blank to a Zelda remake while laughing, when he could have denied it, like how he denied a Zelda Dungeon Maker in an interview during the same time period, or in another magazine where he was talking about how he wasn't sure if fans would really know who Raru is from Ocarina of Time anymore. But then we've also seen multiple Ocarina of Time Lego sets, which really fits into the whole Nintendo cross-promotional strategy thing. We've seen how Nintendo cross-promotes a lot of their different IP with different things, the movies, Legos, the parks, and they lead eventually to games like the Mario Galaxy 2 remaster, like Donkey Kong Bonanza. We have a live-action Zelda movie coming out. It's Zelda's 40th anniversary, where historically, in the summertime, not in February, Nintendo tends to announce Zelda anniversary things, such as teasing the future of Zelda and also some releases. And so here we are, early on to the Switch 2 era, and typically we either get a major Mario or major Zelda thing, if not both. It looks like Mario, reportedly, according to Nate the Hate, won't be coming out until 2027, and so what does that leave? Zelda, but Tears of the Kingdom just came out in 2023. It would be too soon for a full-on new game, but a remake just might be possible. And it seems like Nintendo's been working on this for such a long time. We've even seen patents of a fairy on screen, very much like Navi from Ocarina of Time. And what's also interesting, we have another interview from Aonuma this past December where he strongly suggests that Nintendo has something in store for Zelda to come out on the Switch 2 really soon. And so here we are now with this report by Nate the Hate that so many different bigger outlets are now widely regurgitating with confidence that we are getting a full remake of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time for later on into this year. Well, since then, some different things have come out that suggest some pretty exciting details about this game. And so what are those details of what is being suggested? That's what we're diving into today. But first, a brief message. Do you find yourself unable to take a good nap during the day from wherever you may be? Then perhaps you are in need of a soft, comfortable sleep mask that blocks out all light. Fortunately, Mad to Sleep, the sponsor for today's video, has just that, a quality sleep mask. This sleep mask has super soft, comfy cushions that cover your eyes and block out all light. It's easy to adjust to different sizes, and it feels great to wear. And it's helped me personally fit in just a bit more rest during my days. So if you're looking to improve your sleep and energy, check out the Mad to Sleep mask using the link in the description below with my code SLEEPRESTART. Something I'd like to point out that I find quite curious, Nintendo, someone else who's known to have inside information and who has teased many big things in the past, including the reveal of the Switch 2 by the way, put out a cryptic tweet back last December where he said a Zelda remake, and yesterday he just reposted this, retweeted it, which seems to suggest that he's indicating the Zelda remake he was teasing last December is what Nate the Hate reported on yesterday morning, the full remake for Ocarina of Time. So that's just a little bit more reason to believe in this remake project. But someone else who heard about this Ocarina of Time remake a long time ago is Special Nick. In 2024, he shared a Discord conversation he was having, and he said here, "Man, I want that Ocarina remake so bad. Got a DM a while back that's got a pretty big budget." Now, for those who haven't been following, Special Nick has shown to get some pretty reliable Nintendo info. He heard about the Mario Galaxy 2 remaster, details of Metroid Prime 4, the launch info with Switch 2 and Mario Kart World. So if he's talking about an Ocarina of Time remake having a pretty big budget, it's absolutely something to pay a lot of attention to. And the idea of an Ocarina of Time remake having a really big budget is actually really good news, because there's been this fear that maybe Nintendo is just taking Ocarina of Time 3D and upscaling that into HD, like basically what you might see of Ocarina of Time 3D in a Citra emulation. Which, if Nintendo did do that, I gotta tell you, I think it would be such a bonehead, tone-deaf move that would not sell that much. Like, I'm not saying it wouldn't sell 1 million plus copies or be profitable. I think it absolutely would. I think it would be profitable similar to the way Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 have been profitable. Kind of profitable, but not nearly as substantial as the success they had with 3D All-Stars back for the 35th anniversary. And this wouldn't be just about software sales. Just an upscale of Ocarina of Time would not push Switch 2 units. Quite frankly, if that's all Nintendo does, me, a hardcore Zelda fan, I'm not sure I would even buy it. We already have Ocarina of Time on Nintendo Classics. It would feel very unnecessary, and wouldn't be bringing the hype or showcasing the Switch 2 in any kind of special way whatsoever. So I think it'd actually be a pretty bad business move, and it would be a huge lost opportunity if that's all they were doing. Of course, Nintendo has done some simple remasters in the past, so I understand why some people might think this could happen. So it's really good news that we're hearing from Special Nick here that he's heard that this actually has a pretty big budget, suggesting something fairly ambitious. But how ambitious? Well, I'm first led to believe this would be something like a Resident Evil 2 through 4 remake, which is a pretty big deal. Those are made to be basically like modern Resident Evil games, but with new gameplay elements and some subtle story changes as well, and changed around environments on top of that. That would be great. But as you see here in this thread, C198 was talking about something just like that. However, Necrofelipe from Universal Nintendo, who from time to time also has heard about some inside things, I wouldn't say they are as consistent or reliable as Special Nick or Nintendo or 8 to Hate, but they have heard things, they have reported on things, they are a journalist, and Necro here is saying, I believe it's even beyond that. Now, saying I believe isn't necessarily saying that he's heard, so let's keep that in mind, but it might mean he's heard, and that's why he believes it could be even beyond a Resident Evil 2 through 4 kind of remake thing, which then has us thinking, oh, are we talking about like a Final Fantasy VII remake level of remake here? Now, I do not believe that Nintendo is going to be making Ocarina of Time into a 3-game series, splitting it off into a trilogy. I do not believe that. What I do think, however, is that this full remake could open the door for future remakes along these lines, like Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess. And I actually think this makes a lot of sense because you look at what Square Enix has done, you look at what Capcom has done, these Final Fantasy and Resident Evil remakes have done a great job to give fans more modern efforts for the respective series that are great holdovers in between the newer mainline entries. I've talked about this before, but the development times for major Zelda games have been taking longer and longer, as it has been across the industry. Like, Tears of the Kingdom had everything going for it almost to have a shorter development cycle than Breath of the Wild, a direct sequel using the same art and assets based in the same world, having that engine in place, all that foundation, and yet Tears of the Kingdom took even longer than Breath of the Wild. I'm sure the pandemic played a role there, but I still think it speaks to the point that we've seen a consistent trend for decades of Zelda projects, 3D Zelda projects, taking longer and longer. We can't wait 8 years between Zelda games. I don't think that's good for business. So what can Nintendo do to afford the Zelda team the amount of time they need to make sure the next open-air Zelda is as good as possible, while also making sure they have major Zelda efforts when they need them to keep the fan base interested and also get them invested into, say for example, the Switch 2 early on. Big boy remake projects. So, what does a big budget entail for an Ocarina of Time remake? Well, let me play you this interview from 2009 that's been doing the rounds. As we see here, it's being shared by Kopu on Twitter. It's really interesting.
ユーザーの皆さんから例えば時のオカリナを今のプラットフォームで出して欲しいみたいなね、そういう話を聞いたりもすることがあるんですけど、やっぱりじゃあその遊びをどう今の時代にを反映した新しいものにしてそのリメイクするのかみたいなところら辺がやっぱりすごく難しいです。それは過去の遊びは、過去に遊んだ人たちのその思いっていうものがあって、例えばその時のオカリナがすごく良かったっていうふうに言ってくれる人たちはその時代の思いみたいなものがそこに付加されてるので、変にそれを変えてしまうとそのタイトル自身が持っていたその良さみたいなものを壊してしまいかねないっていうところがあって。なので、それが今のテクノロジーでまた全然違うものを可能にするっていうことが見えた時に初めてやろうっていうことになるんですが、今はまだ新しいタイトルでそういうものを実現するっていう方向での考えを優先して作ってますので、またそういう何かがこうインスピレーション湧いてくるような時があればそういうことは実現してみたいなとは思ってます。
Now, if you've gotten this far and you find yourself enjoying my videos, but you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. So the basic suggestion by this interview is that Aonuma does not believe they should be remaking Zelda projects unless they can make sure they maintain or keep the essence from its original release during the period of time it came out, while also incorporating some sort of innovation with the new hardware, something making it worthwhile. And I think this is interesting to keep in mind when thinking about the Ocarina of Time remake, especially when Aonuma has probably teased this project 3 different times. The no comment interview from Game Informer, the Rara reference in the Nintendo Dream magazine, and the most recent one where Aonuma was talking about how Koei Tecmo beat them to the punch in getting Zelda on Switch 2 first, implying that something is coming really soon. And so I think the approach for an Ocarina of Time remake, a full remake with a big budget that could perhaps have this game be something along the lines of a Resident Evil 2 through 4 remake, or perhaps even beyond that, it would mean, yes, the visuals would be vastly improved. We're talking about being visually rebuilt here. This would be made to look like a modern Zelda game, like if they were to make a new Zelda game for Switch 2, that's what we're talking about here visually, like how that's going to look. So this is going to be a great teaser for the future of Zelda as well. But it wouldn't just be visuals, it would be presentation. I imagine the cutscenes will be a lot more dynamic and interesting. They'll probably be incorporating voice acting, telling us a more compelling story here, and that likely would entail some adjustments, some tweaks here and there. The story won't be told exactly the same, there would be some shifts, especially if we're talking about some significant gameplay changes as well. They might have to remix things a little bit. And there has been some talk that perhaps they might even rebuild Ocarina of Time with the Breath of the Wild engine. And let me stress, this would not mean that it would look like Breath of the Wild visually. The Wind Waker and Twilight Princess were also made on the same engine, and those 2 Zelda games are perhaps the most vastly different visually in the entire series. So even if this full remake of Ocarina of Time is made with the Breath of the Wild engine, that does not mean it's going to look like it visually. What it would suggest is that the underlying mechanics, the technology used in Breath of the Wild could also be utilized in this Ocarina of Time remake, such as the weather effects, such as the crazy physics, things of that nature. And thinking about this, and also considering a theory I put out a few months back when we saw the trailer for the Ocarina of Time Lego set Link vs. Ganon, there was something about that I found very curious, and at the time, I acknowledged it as kind of crazy, and other people reminded me of that it was kind of crazy. But now, with all this extra support for the full remake actually happening, I'm going to revisit it here. They made an interesting change in terms of how events occurred with the Lego set. They showcased Link jumping from the tower to attack Ganon. This is not something possible in the actual game, but if they were to be rebuilding this Ocarina of Time remake with newer Zelda mechanics in mind, then it would be possible. The ability to sprint and climb up walls and surfaces like that and then jump from them, then an action like this would be possible. It's something possible in Breath of the Wild, so maybe they want to incorporate some mechanics like that into this game, and maybe that Lego set was a teaser for it. If this Lego set is coming out because it is a part of Nintendo's big cross-promotional strategy leading up to the big remake, and given that it just came out, maybe it is indeed a little bit of a teaser of that. It seems a lot more believable now, right? And so we could be looking at Ocarina of Time being remade and with newer mechanics being integrated here, perhaps even a manual jump. You see, in older Zelda games, there was an auto jump, but now in Breath and Tears, it's a manual jump, like most action adventures and platformers. But this might also lead to Nintendo wanting to rethink the entire dungeon layouts for every dungeon in Ocarina of Time, taking this as an opportunity to rebuild every dungeon, reimagine them, maintaining that essence, but also creating new experiences here, which could be really exciting for returning players, but also great for new players so they can experience the spirit of Ocarina of Time, but with modern technology. And since we're talking about dungeons, what if they're also going to revisit some things that they perhaps would have wanted to put into Ocarina of Time but didn't? Like, I look at the Light Temple, where Link receives the Light Medallion for basically nothing. It would make a lot of sense to add in a Light Temple dungeon there, one that's kind of like a rite of passage, a test for Link in his new adult form so he can figure out how to function as an adult. A Light Temple would make a lot of sense from that perspective, and then you are awarded the Light Medallion after beating it, and then are allowed to explore the world as an adult afterwards. This would make a lot more sense and could be an addition in this potential full remake. Now, if they do go in this direction of expanding upon the events where you acquire the Light Medallion by turning it into an actual Light Temple dungeon, we'd also have a lot more time and opportunity to interact with the character of Rauru. And what's interesting about this is that now the name Rauru in the series of Legend of Zelda holds even more meaning because there's this new version of Rauru from Tears of the Kingdom that is the original king of Hyrule. So with this new lore now, I think it might be pretty important to recharacterize the Rauru from Ocarina of Time with this in mind. So there could be some cool little extra details there that I think a lot of fans would appreciate. And if they do that, I would also think they would provide some sort of explanation as to what's going on with the Rito, depict the Gerudo perhaps a little bit more differently, update the Zoras and the Gorons as well. All of these different races and characters have evolved over the years with the different Zelda games. But something else that comes to mind is the usage of the Ice Arrows in Ocarina of Time. They were relegated to just being an optional quest. You could play the entire game and never even see them. It's been thought that they had a greater purpose for the Ice Arrows, but due to just the process of development, that's not what occurred. What if this time around they rethink that and they make the Ice Arrows more meaningful? Or what if they take a look at certain items in Ocarina of Time and kind of Breath of the Wild them in a way where they have a wide variety of application, such as the hookshot. What if the hookshot becomes something you can apply to in more environments and do more cool things with? Maybe you can hookshot to different parts of the environment and not just specific points, leading to a greater level of exploration. If they are expanding the world here, incorporating Breath of the Wild-like mechanics, then this would make a lot of sense and we could be looking at a bigger game here. So when talking about a full remake that has a big budget, ideas like this seem plausible. And I'll throw out something else from a story perspective. Ocarina of Time is where the timeline of the Zelda series split into 3, but really when you play the game, there's only actually an indication of 2 different timelines, not 3. So it would be interesting if they tweak things in the ending of Ocarina of Time to represent the 3 different timeline splits. So between voice acting, improved visuals, tweaking the story, but also remixing all the dungeons with modern Breath of the Wild mechanics, expanding the world, there's potential for something super ambitious and exciting here. And so when we hear about that big budget, that full remake, this being like the premier holiday title for presumably Switch 2 later this year, there's that kind of potential. But what do you all think? What do you make of all this latest info and this idea that this remake has a big budget? What do you think that's going to mean? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget, you can use my code SLEEPRESTART when checking the link in the description below for the Manta Sleep Mask. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.